everyone, welcome to TB Makes, a knitting podcast. My name is Taylor and this is episode 6. In today's episode, I actually filmed a little bit more of a vlog than a knitting podcast, and I started that back on Thursday, April 2nd. Today is the 12th, so it's been about a week and a couple days. I'm just sitting down to film the end of this episode, so I will let you jump back to April 2nd and I'll see you shortly. Today is Thursday, April 2nd. We're just about to start a long weekend, so I'm super excited for that. In today's episode, I'm gonna wander from the traditional podcast, knitting podcast format, where I go over whips, finished objects, new cast-ons, all of that, and I want to focus on more of a spring cleaning vlog. So I want to talk about, I have my whip basket right here. It's overflowing and it's unorganized right now. I also have a couple things in here that are considered finished in my mind but need some final touches. Usually I mark a project as finished on Ravelry once I bind off. So even if I haven't woven in the ends or done finishing touches, which maybe I shouldn't do, but that's how I do it. When the knitting is complete and it's blocking, that's when it's done in my mind. And then I also have a project that I do have, I guess, 90% complete. I have a sock tube here that I want to add the heels, toes, and cuffs to, so I thought I could talk about that in this vlog. But generally, I want to organize my whip basket, finish a few things, and also see if there's anything I could frog. So that's the goal of this vlog. This vlog may last 1 or 2 weeks, I'm not really sure, but I'll bring you along with me. I don't think I'm going to go too in-depth into what I have in my whip basket or do too much today, but one thing I do need to do today is I have this Inclinations cowl that is everything but seamed. This is the Inclinations cowl by Andrea Mowry. I cast it on in July, the very end of July 2025, and finished it at the end of December, actually December 31st. And the reason why I cast this project on was because my partner's extended family does a Secret Santa, but we had to postpone our Secret Santa Christmas get-together earlier in December, and we're just now getting the chance to do that this weekend. So this is a gift for the Secret Santa. I actually have one of his sisters. I'm gonna seam this in a moment, but I thought I would tell you a little bit more about the project first. I don't know what shape you would call this, but it's one of those cowls that almost looks like a bandana cowl. You have the top of the cowl here, and then increases and decreases on either side, which create these two straight lines, and then a bit of a triangle at the bottom. This actually turned out a lot larger than I expected it. It's definitely longer than it's meant to be, but I think once it's seamed and worn, the difference won't be as noticeable, and I think it'll still look nice. You just gotta trust the process. I used a US 3 or 3.25 millimeter needles, but the pattern calls for a US 2 2.75 millimeter needle, and I think I did that because when I've knit Andrea Mowry cowls in the past, my gauge is always tighter than hers, so I didn't swatch, I just sized up my needles, which maybe I shouldn't have done that, but we have the cowls on, so there's nothing I can do about that now. For the yarn, earlier last year, Cozy Posy Yarn Co., who was hand-dyeing yarn on the East Coast, I believe in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, but has now moved to Ontario. They did a yarn collection based on different places in Canada. It was a pre-order, so I picked up yarn at that time, and I wasn't actually intending to knit the Inclinations cowl until the yarn arrived. I just picked out 2 skeins because I liked the colorways, and they were doing a $5 flat rate shipping without tracking if you purchase 2 skeins or less. I picked out, and I'm gonna include pictures of what the yarn looks like before it was knit up into the cowl, because you do have micro stripes with the Inclinations cowl, but the green color that you're seeing is the colorway Killarney, which is a provincial park in like northern Ontario. My partner and I actually went camping there this summer, and that's when I cast this cowl on, so it felt appropriate to bring this project with me, knowing that we were going to be there and I wanted to knit with this yarn that was named after the park. Sorry, I actually cast this project on right before we went camping at Arrowhead Provincial Park in July. We did go to Killarney later on, but in the fall. So I realized that as I was pulling pictures to insert here. So it was cast on at Arrowhead, not Killarney, but we did end up going to Killarney as well. And then there's a multicolored skein in here as well, and that colorway is called Ontario. So there were a lot of really cool colorways in the collection, but I thought to help narrow down the colors that I wanted to pick, I thought it would be cool to pair the Killarney colorway with the Ontario colorway. And I think that for the most part, there were 2 colors per province or territory. That is the yarn that I use in the Inclination cowl. And then, like I said, there is a bit of micro striping going on here, but the texture of this cowl is half fisherman rib, which is a yarn texture that I've knit a lot this year actually. Between the Inclinations cowl, the Stria that you would have seen in my last episode. I also knit a jaunty by Andrea. I think they're all actually Andrea Mowry patterns. So I've knit the Inclinations cowl, the jaunty, plus I have another jaunty on the go, and my Stria cardigan. That's all I have to say about the Inclinations cowl. I'm gonna seam it so that I can gift it this weekend. Alright, it's been a couple hours. I filmed my first update on my lunch break. Since then, I had a little bit more work to do. I'm now off for the afternoon with some flex time, so I was able to finish seaming up my cowl. I've washed a couple knits that needed to be cleaned, and I've took my dog on a walk, and I've just been hanging out and knitting, so that's been nice. I thought I'd show you the cowl all finished and seamed. I did also remeasure it before seaming it, and overall I'm about 2 inches bigger on each of the measurements that are included in the pattern, but I think that's all right. It still looks good. But here it is. I didn't follow the seaming instructions exactly. I kind of just like went with it. But here's how the cowl turned out. Like I mentioned, my partner and I are going out of town for the weekend, and I'm gonna be packing shortly. So although I'm not gonna talk more in depth about these whips, and I did talk about them in my last episode, episode 5, I thought I would show you what I'm packing in terms of knitting projects. For a small project that I can just throw in my purse, I'm bringing the RibRib socks by James and Watts. This stitch marker is to help keep track of my progress, so that's where I'm starting the weekend at. And then the main project that I'm really focusing on right now is the Dogwood cardigan by Andrea Gaughan. I did just throw it on some try it on tubing because I'm maybe 3 inches into the body under the arms and I haven't tried it on yet, so I'm gonna do that now. I think it fits pretty well in terms of the sleeve opening, and of course the edges are rolling in right now, but it looks like that'll fit nicely, especially once I block it and add the ribbing. All right, so I can officially check the Inclinations cowl off my list of things I need to clean out of my knitting whip basket, even though it's not counted in my total of whips that I want to kind of work on over spring and get my full whip count down that I mentioned in my last video where I talked about my spring knitting plans. It is good to get it done and know that it'll soon be gone to the right person. I'm gonna go keep working on this. I'm sure I'll be back soon with another update. Okay, hey everyone. over. It's Tuesday, April 7th, and I just got back from work not too long ago. Today I wore my DRK Everyday sweater by Andrea Mowry in this really nice, it's a merino single held with Surrey lace. I think this is one of the nicest yarn combinations I've used in a sweater. And the yarn is from Cozy Posy Yarn Co. They are the dyer who dyed the yarn in the Inclinations cowl that I talked about on Thursday. Today I just wanted to give a quick update about how my knitting went over the long weekend, as well as a couple project updates. So I did make some good progress on my Dogwood cardigan. On Friday I was about 3 inches into the body, and now I'm about 6 inches into the body. I think I'll be knitting 11 inches total before I add on the ribbing. That's a little bit longer than the pattern calls for, but I think the pattern's pretty cropped and I'm taller and I think I want a little bit more length than that. So I mostly knit on that Friday afternoon. The weather was really nice, so we were sitting outside and watching baseball at my partner's parents' house. They have like a covered deck, so we were doing that. And then I think I knit a bit on this yesterday as well. Like I mentioned, we were traveling. We were on the GO train for a little bit on Friday and Sunday, and then we spent about 6 hours in the car on Saturday. I did get some knitting done on the way there, but on the way back I was driving first, and then when I switched to the passenger seat it was kind of dark out, so I didn't knit on this for 6 hours on Saturday, but in the car and on the GO train I did quite a bit of knitting. So these are the RibRib socks by James N. Watts, and this is where I started before the weekend. So I finished the rest of the foot because they're toe up. I knit the short row heel, and then I started on the leg. I'll talk more about this in another podcast episode, but I did just want to quickly share that we're making some good progress, which is important because I realized for my next project I kind of need these needles, so I either need to finish the sock and use the needles before I start the second sock, or put this on hold and just put some like scrap yarn in there and borrow the needles. Alright, so that was a very quick project update, but this video is more so focusing on cleaning up my whip basket a little bit. So Thursday I finished the Inclinations cowl, which was a finished project. It just needed to be seamed. I gifted that this weekend and my partner's sister really liked it. Another thing that I mentioned was a sock tube that I'm working on. The sock tube is fully cranked. It just needs heels, toes, and cuffs. I'll really quickly mention that earlier this year I bought a circular sock knitting machine. I purchased it from Sound and Fibre Yarn Co., which is a yarn shop located in Parry Sound, Ontario, and they 3D print their own sock machines and sell them in their store as well as online. I've cranked one tube with it so far and I enjoyed it, but I haven't turned it into actual socks yet. So last night I decided I wanted to get this sock tube ready so that I could easily figure out where the heels, toes, and cuffs are gonna go when I go to knit the toes, heels, and cuffs into the sock, because the sock tube, it's ready to go. It's been cranked. One thing to know about this sock tube I guess I should say, to help me figure out where I'm going to place my heels, toes, and cuffs, I took an existing pair of socks that I recently finished for my partner. If I didn't, I don't think I mentioned this already, but this pair of socks is going to be for my partner. I recently finished this pair of socks for him, and I haven't given them to him yet because I wanted to use them as a reference for this tube. But these were hand knit, and I already took measurements based off of his shoe size and foot size to know where to place the heel. When I knit this sock tube, I knit the cuff, the full sock tube, and knit the toe immediately, and did the same thing on the second sock, and then put in an afterthought heel. Now, one thing to know about these socks compared to this sock tube, they're both 72 stitches, but if you place them next to each other and you measure their size, their width and their gauge, you'll actually see that this sock that I hand knit is a little bit looser compared to the gauge of this cranked tube. This is the first tube I cranked on my sock machine. I still need to get used to the gauge and figure out what works best for my socks. But I took a bunch of notes, which are hard to see, on both of these sock tubes. So for the hand knit socks, the total length of the tube, so after the cuff to before the toe, is 33.5 centimeters. That's a total of 150 rows or rounds, 150 rounds. The width is 11 centimeters and the gauge is 17 stitches by 22 rows per 5 centimeters. The sock tube is only 9 3/4 centimeters wide. That's about 1 1/4 centimeters less in width, and I measured roughly the same length. So if you see this black stitch marker and this red stitch marker, this is where the sock is going to start, and I apologize if you can hear my dog in the background. This black stitch marker is where the sock cuff will go, and then this red stitch marker is where the toe will go. One second. So the first thing I did was figure out how long I wanted the sock tube to be for the actual sock, and then I added in gold stitch markers and a silver one to help mark the rows so that I could repeat the same thing for the second sock, which is down here. So sock 1 is 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 20, 40, 60, and then between here is 15 rows. So the socks I make from this sock tube will be 34.5 centimeters long and a total of 175 rounds. I then took this sock that I knit and I measured from the beginning of the toe to where the heel starts, and this measurement is 16.5 centimeters. And since this is where the toe will start, I measured up this way, and I actually placed the stitch marker at 17 centimeters, so I gave myself a little bit more wiggle room just because there's more negative ease in this sock. So that is where the green stitch marker is. From the black stitch marker to the red stitch marker is 175 rows. The green stitch marker is placed in the 90th row. And then I also put in a few stitch markers in the same row as the green stitch marker to help mark where the heel will go. So this is where the heel will start and end in terms of where I'm picking up stitches, and then I put one in the middle just to help keep track of the row when I go to pick up stitches. Because this is a 72 stitch sock, the total number of stitches between this stitch marker and this stitch marker, including these two, is 36 stitches. And then this one I just placed in the 18th stitch of the row. And then I repeated the same thing. I gave myself a few rows of wiggle room. I have a black stitch marker here to mark the beginning of the second sock, and this yellow stitch marker is 175 rows from the black stitch marker, and same thing, I placed a blue stitch marker in the 90th row. So that is the sock tube that I'm working on, and the math I did to help mark the heels, toes, and cuffs. So now I just need to actually do the knitting part of that, but I thought I would show you before I cut the sock, put my needles in and cut the sock and do the knitting. Now on Thursday when I started this video, I mentioned I had one other project in my whip basket that is technically finished, but I still need to do some finishing touches on so that I can wear it. And I'm not going to talk too much about it today, but I will talk more about it another day when I finish all of the things that need to be done. But I'll quickly show you last year I knit the Maxine sweater by Laura Penrose, and if you know the Maxine sweater, you'll know that that sweater is not a cardigan, it's a pullover. And I actually I modified the sweater to steek it so that it could be a cardigan. And one thing I hadn't done yet was finish weaving in all my ends. So that is what I did yesterday. Yesterday evening, I wove in all the ends of this sweater, so I feel great knowing that's done now. And then I only have 2 more things left to do before this sweater is considered finished. You can see my steek panel is right here, but I haven't secured it or sewn it down at all. And if you're wondering what this gray yarn is for, I did a crocheted reinforcement as well as a sewn reinforcement. That one will be harder to see, but I just wanted to make sure my first steek was extra secure. So I need to sew down the steek panel so that it's nice and flush with the inside of the sweater. And this is the thing that's really been stopping me from finishing this sweater, because I'm nervous to sew it down and I want it to look nice on the inside and I don't want it to be noticeable on the outside. I just need to sit down and actually find some time where I can focus on it and just do it, because I don't think it'll be that difficult once I do it. I think I already did the hard part, which was the reinforcement and cutting it. And then I also need to add some buttons, but I have buttons picked out. Actually, they're right here. That's the last thing that I need to do for that. I don't know if you can hear it, but my partner just turned on the baseball game, so I'm gonna go watch that, eat my dinner. I might not work on the sock tube tonight. I might stick to the Dogwood cardigan, but I think the next time I have an update for you will probably be when I am working on these socks.
He's gonna give him the flu.
He's gonna give him the flu. He just didn't want Cosman to get toast.
Yeah.
Today, and I'm just on my lunch break right now, so I thought I would give you a quick update on what I worked on last night. So I did end up knitting the toe of the sock tube that I showed you. I think last night I said I wasn't gonna work on the sock, but then I immediately changed my mind. So I knit the toe on the first sock, and I also got the needles ready for the afterthought heel. After I knit the afterthought heel, all I'll have left to do for sock 1 is the cuff. Last night, I didn't end up telling you about the yarn I used, so I thought I would do that now. The sock tube was knit out of Cascade Heritage Solid sock yarn, which I believe is a 75-25 superwash merino nylon base. The colorway is 5649 Iris. And the toe is the same yarn, but in the colorway 5642 Blood Orange. And I'm gonna do a little bit of a color blocking moment and use this navy yarn for the heel. This is a different yarn. This is the Lang Yarns Jawwall Superwash, another 75-25 sock yarn. And this colorway is 25 Navy. When I get to the cuff, I think I'm just gonna use the main color for some ribbing, and I might do some contrast stripes in the contrast colors. I'll have all the details in my Ravelry project page for this sock, but for the toe, I just did a very standard toe decrease. So I knit 2 rounds of plain stockinette, and then I decreased 4 stitches, 2 on either side on both sides, every other row, until I got to 16 stitches on each needle. And like I mentioned yesterday, I have 72 stitches total, so on Magic Loop that's 36 stitches on each needle. So once I got to 16 stitches total, 16 stitches on each needle, I grafted the toe together. I'm gonna follow the same instructions that I used for this heel, which I kind of just made up as I went, but followed a typical toe. I followed a typical toe decrease, but slightly modified it. So for this heel, I'm gonna knit 6 rounds of plain stockinette, then decrease 4 stitches every other row until I get to 20 stitches on each needle, and then I'll decrease 4 stitches every row until I have 14 stitches on each needle and graft that. That's what I did for the other heel, and I think it worked pretty well. One more thing about the heel, this is not meant to be a tutorial, but I thought I would just share what I'm doing as I'm doing it. When I picked it, if you've never picked up for an afterthought heel, you pick up stitches on either side of one row, and I'll have a picture here where you can hopefully see better what I'm talking about. And then you cut the middle stitch in that middle row and you unravel from the center out on either end of that middle stitch. I think I'll try to maybe insert a picture, but you leave 2 stitches on either end of the heel to help prevent holes when you go to start knitting. I don't have anything else to say about this sock right now, but I'll definitely show you when both socks are done, and at that point I'll probably focus on finishing securing the steek panels of the Maxine sweater. I'm thinking I'll have these socks done by the weekend. Alright, I think it's been a few days since I filmed my last update, and I'm now back to film the end of the episode. So, spoiler alert, I am wearing one of the things we're going to talk about. But before I do that, let's catch up. I think the last clip I filmed was on Tuesday, and today is Sunday, April 12th, so it has been a few days, but I've gotten a lot done. I also took I had a little bit of a break from knitting a couple evenings this week, so that's why it took a little bit longer to get to this update. On Wednesday, I took a break from knitting and I did my nails while watching the Knit Nat Chit Chat, the latest live stream of the Knit Nat Chit Chat podcast with Jessie May and Park, and that was really fun to watch. And then I also on Friday went to the Blue Jays game, so I wasn't knitting much Friday evening either. It turns out Friday was an ideal game to go to because they did actually win that game, and it was a great game to watch. They have been on a bit of a losing streak, and they do have a few injuries, so I'm happy they won on Friday and that we had fun. Over the past few days, I also finished a couple books. So I was reading The Anatomy of an Alibi by Ashley Eslton, and that is a new release from sometime this year. I previously read her book First Lie Wins, and I really enjoyed that, so I was looking forward to seeing that she had a new book out. Overall, it was pretty good. I think I gave it maybe 3.5 or 4 stars on Storygraph. Overall, I thought it was a good book and enjoyed it. I thought it was a thriller, like mystery. I wouldn't necessarily, it's not what I would necessarily call a thriller. Like, there was suspense, but it wasn't, I don't know, there was just something about it that made it not feel quite like a thriller and more like a mystery to me, like a murder mystery. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but the way it ended and when you find out who murdered the husband felt a bit like there were some clues, but it wasn't like oh, all of these things are making sense now. It kind of felt like a solution was presented at the last second. So yeah, but overall it was a good book, and I enjoyed both her books that I've read, First Lie Wins and Anatomy of Alibi. And then I also reread Funny Story by Emily Henry over the weekend. I listened to both of these on audiobook, so while I was knitting and like stuff like that. Listened or read Funny Story a couple times now, I think at least 3, and I think it might be one of my favorite Emily Henry books, and I just wanted I would give that one a 5-star because I've obviously read it multiple times. So, but despite not knitting a ton either of those evenings, since Tuesday, I have made some good progress. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are the socks, the sock tubes. These are not the best sock blockers because they're actually too small, but I've pretty much finished these socks. Here is the first sock. Last time I was just about to start the ribbing. So we've already talked about the toe and the heel, and for the cuff, I ended up doing 2 stripes of each of the main colors. Sorry, each of the contrast colors. So I did 5 rounds of 1x1 rib in the main color, 5 rounds in the blue contrast color, 3 rounds in the main color, and then 5 rounds in the red, the second contrast color, and then I just bound off using the sewn tubular bind off. I think it's called the Italian bind off. I wanted to wrap this podcast up right now instead of later on in the evening. I was gonna wait until I finished both so I could show you both, but I wanted to film this now. So later this evening I will finish the second heel, but you can see this sock tube now also has the toe and the cuff, and I'm working on the heel. And I will put in a picture for accountability. I did finish both of these before putting this episode out. So that is my first update for this portion of the podcast. Pair of socks are done. Let's talk about what I'm wearing. On Tuesday, I shared that I finished weaving in the ends of this sweater and that I needed to secure the steek panels. So I did secure the steek panels earlier today. I did actually take some footage while I was sewing them down. I think I just used a whip stitch. I think that's what it's called. I ended up finding a super simple tutorial that was really just someone showing, like filming as they were doing it, but just seeing that how they were doing it really helped me. So maybe I'll link that below, and I'll show you the footage from when I was sewing the steek panels down.
The what? Oh, no, sorry.
It's pretty intense, huh?
Yeah.
They have some really good angles,
yeah.
like comparisons.
Yeah. I was like I remember at the game thinking like it wasn't much of a stop.
I didn't really see it that clearly because I was knitting.
Yeah.
All I know is John Schneider had a big reaction.
Yeah. It's tricky because his, like, even when they had the side-by-side, like, it was a half-second difference less on some of them between, like, the valid stops and the not stop.
Yeah.
He kind of does it to himself, in a way.
Yeah. Like, when you're a pitcher, you do gotta be aware of that, right?
Yeah. And my thing about it is, like, he doesn't vary his timing very much. It makes it easy to steal on him because, like, you've got a built-in timing mechanism as a runner.
So true.
You see 1, 2, 3, you wait like a beat. You might not even have to wait that beat because he's probably already going. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, come on, shirts.
We believe in shirts.
I believe in shirts. Wow, they really said Brandon Valenzuela, you're starting catching up. Congrats. But the interesting thing is, if he ends up being good, like, what do you do, you know?
He might end up getting traded.
Because, like, if you have 2 starting quality catchers, like, he's worth more probably traded than he is as a backup, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what they're thinking, but it's interesting.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, if he does good, he's getting traded.
Yeah, because like, you're happy with Kurt.
Yeah, and he probably will want more.
Yeah. But maybe you move more to a 50-50 split, though. You know?
But
I could see that.
I don't know.
But you're right, though. If he really is, like, a quality starting catcher, like, teams will pay a lot for that, so.
I don't know. I feel like they just signed Kirk for, like...
They did 5 years, I think?
Yeah.
This is year 2, yeah. No.
And I feel like the intention was, like, he's the everyday guy.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
So that's all I'm...
No, sorry, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Oh, nice pitch.
It didn't take me that long to do. I think overall it took 30 minutes. 15 minutes per steek panel. I have seen people use ribbon to sew over the steek panel, which makes it look a little bit nicer, but it does feel a little bit bulky, so I like not having that extra bulk, and I think you're not actually going to see the inside that much, so I'm not too worried about that. I think that it could look a little bit nicer, but it was my first time doing it, so I'm not going to be too picky about that. After that, I sewed on the buttons, so the sweater is actually finished. Now, I think I've talked a lot about the sweater without actually saying what it is, so I'm going to give you a little bit more details on the sweater, and I think you can hear Jerry walking around, so I apologize if you can hear that, but he's just living. Earlier, I mentioned that this was a finished object that had been sitting in my whip basket, and I just hadn't gotten around to securing the steeks and sewing the buttons on, as well as weaving in my ends. So it was technically already a finished object, just needed a few final touches that I put off for 6 months. Let's not talk about it. I could have been wearing this 6 months ago, but this is the Maxine sweater by Penrose. And I started this back in February of 2025 as a part of the Sibling Energy bucket list knit along. I'm not sure if it was a knit along or make along. It was a Cowl that they hosted throughout most of 2025. I think it started in January and went until sometime in the end of October, and I did do all of the knitting. Okay, so the idea of the knit along was to pick a bucket list item, a project that is on your bucket list. The reason that it's on your bucket list is probably because it's a larger project or you're taking on a skill that you've never done before. For me, something that I wanted to do was steek a sweater. So this is my first steeked sweater. I took the Maxine sweater pattern from Penrose and I added a steek column to the middle, and then ended up steeking the sweater and turning it into a cardigan. I think I got distracted. So this sweater I started on February 2nd of 2025 and finished on September 23rd of 2025. I knit the size 5, and this sweater calls for a DK weight yarn. I purchased the main color, but for all the contrast colors I used yarn that was already in my stash. The main color is Santa's Garn Pure Gin in the colorway Matcha, and I really love this green color. If you've watched any of my other episodes, I think this color or something similar is probably in every episode, and I've also got my nail polish to match, which was not intentional. We're gonna do some math because I wrote down some numbers, but I didn't actually do the math. I don't know how much I used of the main color, but I do have how many grams I've used for the contrast colors. So hold for 1 second. I should have looked at my notes and made sure I was prepared to talk about this sweater before, since it's been so long since I actually finished it, but we're just gonna go with it. I'm gonna take my final measurements of the sweater too and be right back. Okay, let's continue talking about the colors that I used in this sweater. In the sweater, the pattern gives you a chart for 3 contrast colors as well as 5. And I'm using 4 contrast colors. The way I did that was I followed the 5 color chart, but I used the same color for colors 2 and 4. For color 1, I'm using this bright green color, which is actually a mohair that I held 4 strands of, and it is the Scranton Stitchers mohair in the color Good Coochie Copy, which is a Bob's Burgers reference. And I used a total of 22 grams for that. For colors 2 and 4, it's the gray color that you see in the quilt star motif, as well as it runs through this motif, and then it's down here as well. It's a dark gray color, and I used Les Garçons British DK, which is their BFL Mash and Blend, and the colorway is Cheryl's Coal Gray, and I used a total of 33 grams for that. For color 3, that is this dark green right here, as well as right here, and then it's down in the bottom motif as well. And that is Hobie's Rainbow Sockwill in their 8 ply, but I don't think they carry that yarn anymore. I don't think it's available, but it was 75% wool, 25% nylon in the color dark olive, and I used 21 grams of that yarn. For color 5, it's the same yarn as color 4, but in the colorway Natural White, and that's just in the middle of this quilt motif as well as down here. So I don't think I've said it yet, but this is a stranded colorwork yoke, and all of the motifs are very easy to follow, and each chart is like you get a chart for this motif, and like so on. So it's really easy to follow, and then you're doing increases between each of the motifs, and I found them really fun to do. And it's also an easy way if you want to like motivate yourself to work your way through a yoke. Be like, I'm gonna knit this motif by this date, and then you can check it off, and then this motif by this date and check it off. And that's kind of how I got through the yoke. So I just measured my final gauge, and the pattern calls for 20 stitches by 28 rounds, and I ended up with 19 by 25. So I usually try to, when I'm doing a sweater like this, get as close as I can to stitch gauge, and then if my row gauge is a little bit off, that's all right. I just make sure I am being conscious of that when knitting the yoke, and then when I get to the body, I'm just usually knitting to a certain length. For my final measurements, I did actually end up getting pretty close to the pattern measurements. For my bust, I ended up with a 47.5 inch bust. The yoke is about 10.25 inches, and then the bicep is 16 inches. For my body, I have 11 inches, but 22 inches overall from collar to hem. Now, to add the steek column, I added 7 stitches in the middle of the front of the sweater. I think normally if you were working on a colorwork cardigan that had a steek, your beginning of round would probably end up being in the middle so that you don't end up with a jog in your colorwork at the back. But because I was just taking an existing sweater pattern and adding a steek to it, and I also never had done a steek before, and I didn't want to like mess with moving the short rows around, I ended up just putting it in the middle and not worrying about the colorwork jog in the back. But I did add a 7-stitch steek column, which was pretty similar to the size of the button band I knew I was gonna do. For my steek column, I purled 1 stitch, knit 5, and then purled another stitch. And I did a crochet reinforcement, and I put those in stitches 3 and 5, and the 5th stitch column is the one I ended up steeking. When it was time to do the button bands, I ended up just looking over a couple other cardigan patterns that I have knit previously that were DK weight, and decided to do a button band pickup of picking up and knitting 4 out of every 5 stitches. And I just did 9 rows of 1x1 ribbing. And for my buttonhole, I just used the 1 row buttonhole technique, and I just did a 3-stitch buttonhole. and spaced them evenly apart. I just measured and did that, and I used 6 buttons in total. These aren't any like special buttons or anything, they're just plastic. They came in like a multi-pack. That's all I have to say about this sweater. I'm really looking forward to actually getting to wear it. I did go out and try and take some finished project pictures of it when we took Jerry, come here. I tried to get some finished object pictures while we took Jerry on a walk this afternoon. Oh, he heard me. This afternoon. I think when I started filming this vlog, I mentioned I might also end up frogging a couple things out of my whip basket. I didn't end up doing that. I just didn't have anything I was ready to make that decision about, and I actually might not end up frogging anything from my whip basket. I don't know, but it does feel nice to get this out of the whip basket, finish the Inclinations cowl that I talked about earlier and gifted, and get that sock tube done. I think that's all I have for this episode, so thanks for watching. My last video got a lot more views than my first few, so that was really cool to see. So if you watched that episode and subscribed and are back, thank you, and thank you for anyone who liked that previous video too. I do also want to quickly mention that I think episodes 2 to 4, the quality is really poor because I didn't realize I made a mistake when exporting them, but I do realize that the quality is not that great, so I apologize for that, and I also know what I did wrong, so I won't do that when uploading this one and any future videos. So yeah, that is all. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.